The Xbox was released in November of 2005. Sony's PlayStation 3 released exactly 1 year later in 2006. Both consoles would enjoy massive success until being officially shut down 10 years later in mid to late 2016. This was an unusually long lifespan for a console. This is considered by many people, myself included, to be the golden era of gaming. Most of these games don't feel that outdated 10 or 15 years later. The online scene fully took off, and every game wasn't drowning in microtransactions and post-release updates to fix its broken launch state. Games were made with no pretense, just grungy, gritty, genre pieces. Sure, we would get the occasional masterwork of storytelling like BioShock, Last of Us, Deus Ex Human Revolution, Journey, or Portal 2, but I think the poster titles that defined the generation were the system sellers. The games you'd play with a can of Monster at 2 AM and just made you say, hell yeah. Modern Warfare, Army of Two, Prototype, Condemned, Criminal Origins, Infamous, Bayonetta. Games with simple titles like Wet or Gun. A lot of people want to relive the glory days, but with many of these games tied to the console they released on, there's a bit of a wall between the average gamer and these beloved titles. But did you know for about $4 you can rent a movie on Amazon that will take you back in time to when these games first released? And I'm not talking about Need for Speed with Jesse Pinkman or that fucking Assassin's Creed movie, or even Mark Wahlberg's Max Payne. I think a lot of people agree that these movies missed the mark when it came to capturing the feel of the games they were based on. But for years, Hollywood has been making video game movies that aren't even based on a real game. Movies that feel like a shot of Mountain Dew straight to the bloodstream. This isn't a phenomenon I noticed myself. The term Xbox Cinema is something I was introduced to, and I think it all started with this list on Letterboxd. It's a good list, but I think it has a few odd additions, like Sicario and Inglourious Bastards. It's not that Xbox Cinema means your movie is bad. In fact, I think this is a good thing. But when I think of Sicario and Inglourious Bastards, I don't immediately think of the action. I think of the smart dialogue, the great cinematography, the tense scenes. I even contest Blood Diamond being there, but that one at least feels like Modern Warfare at the very end. So today I'm going to outline some elements that define Xbox Cinema in my eyes. But before we do that, I'm making a bold decision. I believe in unity among all people, and because of that, today I'm officially renaming Xbox Cinema to 7th Gen Cinema to include those memories of our beloved PlayStation 3. Before we get into it, I'm going to ask you to hit the subscribe button. It means a lot. I'm addicted to the dopamine hit, and this channel is getting real close to 500 subscribers. I'm also going to recommend you a video I made a little while back about the downfall of the Xbox brand. A more prescient video than I imagined it would be when I made it. There should be a tag on screen right now to go watch that. You know what's cool? When everything in a story is so self-serious, no matter how absurd the situation is, that it starts to border on parody. And the yellow piss filter. Definitely the yellow piss filter. Every game on the 7th gen was geared to be as gritty and cool as possible, but that didn't stop them from making games aimed at nerds. What this generation was so great at doing was taking stuff for nerds like Knights and sci-fi and making it seem mature and grounded and realistic, but in that distinctly 2010s way. Resident Evil released on the PlayStation 1 in March of 1996. It was a popular game, but it was heavily inspired by B-movie horror films from the 1960s and was played to be very corny and silly. Not on the PlayStation 3 though. Now the Haunted Mansion Scooby-Doo setting has been traded for war-torn Africa. The zombies have fucking guns now, and Chris Redfield is a grizzled super soldier bigger than Captain America. And don't forget that yellow piss filter, it was everywhere. Even Tomb Raider got the gritty overhaul treatment. Just look at the cover for Tomb Raider Underworld, they put the piss filter on here too, it's everywhere. Condemned Criminal Origins, released in 2005 as a launch title for the Xbox 360. This thing is so early into the lifespan it doesn't even have achievements. It was developed by Monolith Productions, who was bought by Warner Brothers in 2004 during the development of Condemned. Monolith is behind the massively popular Fear series and Mordor series, and yes, it was just shut down by Microsoft. A very kind thank you for crafting a launch title for their biggest success ever. Condemned is the grimiest, grittiest horror game ever made. It's essentially just 6 hours of crawling through abandoned buildings and beating crackheads to death with a pipe. A sequel released 3 years later in 2008 called Condemned Bloodshot. And this game turned everything up to 11. The villain from the first game is now bald and covered in scars, and the normal FBI agent hero from the original game is now a disheveled alcoholic maniac who gets into bar fights. At the end, you find out that the villains are an Illuminati cult that uses throat singing to make people violent and invented evil at the dawn of time.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
This does not make the game drop the facade of being mature and gritty. This is actually something I respect quite a bit. Everything these days loves to wink at the audience as if we're stupid for enjoying something that's a little bit ridiculous. What happened to just owning up to what you were making? You can't be embarrassed by what you're doing. A movie that perfectly captures this is Equilibrium from 2002, starring Christian Bale and Sean Bean. In a world where all books and art and all forms of self-expression are illegal, and everyone practices a made-up martial art called gun kata that involves punching people, you guessed it, with your gun. Everyone's outfits are slick leather trench coats, and you are burned alive in a giant oven if you read a book. It is just violent and overbearing for the entire runtime. The evil corporate enforcers even shoot a bunch of dogs off screen because that's how evil this world is. But, like Condemned, Equilibrium does not want to wink at the camera. It doesn't want to imply you're stupid for liking it. It just wants you to see how cool it is watching Christian Bale doing some made-up kung fu and killing people with swords. You can practically see the heads-up display appear on screen every time Christian Bale starts fighting people. The options for a 7th gen protagonist usually play into a few archetypes. Option 1. The audience insert. Most often a generic white guy, someone the audience can imagine themselves as. You may think of Cole McGrath, or Isaac Clarke, or Alex Mercer. To help players connect, these characters start out as normal people with normal jobs. Cole was just a bike messenger, Isaac was a simple engineer, and Alex was a genetic researcher. But at the start of the story, they become central to the events of the story, and these average guys have personal reasons to become involved with the plot. Isaac Clarke just wants to survive and find his girlfriend. Cole McGrath and Alex Mercer want to uncover the truth about how they were given these powers as the noose of a large government force starts to tighten around their necks. You play these games and you think to yourself, well, if I were in that situation, I'd want to survive and find my girlfriend too. Thus, you can imagine yourself taking similar actions to the heroes. In movies, you can find similar protagonists in District 9's Wickus Van de Mer... I don't know. A character who does not work for this category is Sam Witwicky from the Transformers films. Why? Well, while Sam is portrayed as a regular guy who finds himself in this situation, there is one key difference. Sam is a loser. Stop! He whines, he's constantly badgered by his parents.
Hi, there's my son's baby booties.
And he never gets to do anything cool. That is what makes these characters work. You want to be Cole because he has awesome powers. You want to be Isaac because he has cool guns and a cool suit. When you watch Transformers, you don't want to be Sam, you want to be Optimus Prime. Protagonist option 2, the veteran soldier. Sometimes the story requires a little bit more than a regular guy. Sometimes the world needs a guy who's already saved it 10 times before. These characters are not meant to be relatable. They're usually a cop, or a soldier, or a mercenary, and are just casually built like a Greek god. Marcus Phoenix, Master Chief, Chris Redfield. Their primary mission is usually not a personal one. Marcus Phoenix is a soldier in basically a post-apocalyptic world. He has one job: eliminate the locusts and defend humanity. Master Chief was genetically altered from birth to be a 7-foot-tall superhuman tasked with one mission: end the war with the Covenant. And Chris Redfield is a cop turned soldier sent to stop the Ouroboros virus in Africa. Unlike Isaac Clarke, they are not motivated by a personal objective like simply surviving. They have a predetermined enemy, and their motivation in the plot is to fulfill objectives given to them by their commanders. They may have personal objectives that they encounter in the story, like when Chris finds Joe Valentine, but the main plot and his actions in it are guided by his directives from the BSAA. In movies, there's one man who plays this role better and more often than anyone else: Gerard Butler. And his greatest achievement in the space is 2013's Olympus Has Fallen, where he plays Mike Banning, former Army Ranger turned former Secret Service agent who has one mission and no personal involvement: kill the terrorists in the White House and free the president. Mike Banning has a wife, but that doesn't matter because all that matters is killing bad guys. Option 3, the female hero. The primary audience for this market is male dominated. A bunch of guys who want to eat Doritos and explode people's heads. What can I say? It sounds like a great time. One of the most common ways of appealing to guys was the female protagonist. They were known for a few traits. It was always a hot woman, usually wearing a jacket and carrying guns or swords, preferably both. Ruby Malone, Noriko, Violet Summer. These characters exist on an entirely different spectrum to their male counterparts. While Marcus Phoenix and Frank Woods are grimy and gritty characters, female protagonists are always graceful and confident. They are most similar to the second category of protagonists, as they are almost always highly skilled and trained in their profession of spying or soldiering. But, unlike their male counterparts who can be very world-weary or beaten down, female characters are always spry and witty and never lose their charm.
I figured you could use my help, Selena.
You're right. I think I chipped a nail back there.
Funny.
Their motivation can be objective-based, like Joanna Dark, or personality-driven, like Ruby Malone, who is out seeking revenge. This makes them very versatile in the space. Hot women kicking ass is actually not a concept invented by the Xbox 360, but if you want a movie that captures this vibe, you can watch Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, as Gemma Arterton plays a jacket-wearing bounty hunter running around the German woods using weird crossbows and old-timey guns to dispatch witches. And for some reason her brother is Jeremy Renner, who is 15 years older than her. Let's move past that though. In a video game, you are usually doing one thing, and that one thing is killing lots of people. In the real world, killing lots of people is bad and generally illegal. But if only there were a way to get past that so we can cut down hundreds of people without having to feel anything. There are plenty of morally complex games this generation, titles like Spec Ops: The Line or even The Last of Us, but the definitive PS3 and 360 games generally had you blasting away hordes of enemies. And it's better all around when you can rest easy knowing that you've only been killing the worst of the worst. Just Cause 2, released in 2010, was developed by Avalanche Studios before being published by Square Enix. You play as Rico Rodriguez, a guy definitely not working for the CIA, who is sent to the fictional island of Panau in Southeast Asia, a country ruled by Pandak Baby Panay. A real nice guy guilty of minor infractions like assassinating his own father, stripping away civil liberties and human rights, ordering mass surveillance, kidnapping and torture, oppression of indigenous people and building for-profit operations on their land, execution and silencing of dissenting voices, and terrorism via nuclear missiles. This is your primary target. A pretty morally reprehensible guy whose orders are carried out by his forces without question or hesitation. So, you really don't have much of a reason to feel bad for gunning them down, or tying one of them to the back of your car and dragging them through the streets at 80 miles an hour. In the same year, a movie came out called The Book of Eli, a dark and oppressive post-apocalyptic action thriller starring Denzel Washington as a blind man tasked with transporting a mysterious book across the wasteland. What does this have to do with Just Cause 2? Well, during his journey, Eli stumbles into an unnamed town run by a man named Carnegie. Carnegie is not a very nice guy. He uses suppression of information, torture, threats of violence, and manipulation to keep the people in his town under his control, enforced by a gang of thugs that obey his every order. If Carnegie exists in the real world, one might be inclined to refer to him as a dictator. So throughout the movie, Eli cuts down Carnegie's men with his sword under the frame of that beloved yellow piss filter, and we never even once question if he's maybe a bad guy for disemboweling someone with a machete. I think if you had one word to describe the games of this generation, it would be angry. Or maybe rebellious. That's two words, but they go hand in hand here. All art is affected by the state of the world around it, like the emphasis on anti-consumerism and fears of nuclear holocaust at the peak of the Cold War in the 80s, or the expressionist art movement in the 20s being influenced by this little event called the horrors of World War I. During the seventh generation, the world, and specifically the United States, were struggling with a lot of things. Paranoia and fear after 9/11, and the government response to it.
We must stop the terror. I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
The 2008 financial crash, and the government response to it. The average person found this to be a scary time, and this in turn made them angry. And when the person making you angry is the government, people tend to get rebellious. Pandemic Studios was the developer behind some fan-favorite titles like Star Wars Battlefront, Destroy All Humans, and Mercenaries: Playground of Destruction. In 2007, they were bought out by EA, 1 year before the global financial crisis. As you can imagine, this event put pressure on EA as a company, and you can probably once again imagine this pressure was transferred to Pandemic Studios. This resulted in a difficult incorporation for Pandemic, who was now being told what to do by a much larger force. There are reports of frequent clashes between Pandemic and EA executives, causing many of their games to be delayed or cancelled fully, like a tie-in game for The Dark Knight, and a sequel to Mercenaries that was criticized for being extremely buggy and unpolished, ultimately underperforming in sales. In 2009, the financial crisis hit EA pretty hard, so they laid off about 1,500 people. This forced the shutdown of Pandemic Studios in November, just 1 month before the release of their final game, The Saboteur. This game was made at a time when Pandemic knew their days were indeed numbered, so it's not hard to picture a studio who had built a legacy on games with a rebellious nature pouring their frustrations with the system they're living under into their final game. The Saboteur takes place in Nazi-occupied France and has you playing as Sean Devlin, a race car driver turned freedom fighter who fights back against his oppressive overlords by blowing up everything he sees. Every area you free from the regime is suddenly flooded with color, as the Nazi-occupied areas are seen only in black and white. Sean Devlin is an angry guy. Understandably, his best friend was executed right in front of him. I wonder if there are any other films that capture this tone of anger and rebellion. I consider Zack Snyder a bit of a 7th gen cinema auteur. I think his magnum opus 2006's 300 is his best outing. Based on a comic book by Frank Miller, based on a lie told by the Spartans, based on a battle that occurred in 480 BC. 300 checks all the benchmarks of 7th gen cinema. It stars Gerard Butler once again playing the grizzled war hero archetype, King Leonidas. The enemies in this film are the all-powerful Persian army led by giant god king Xerxes, who wants to subjugate all of Athens to his rule. The film plays everything completely serious, even when giant mythical monsters are charging the battlefield and half-naked men are dancing in the rain on a beach. This film has everything, even down to that damn piss filter. I think it would be fair to label this angriest movie ever made. Not only do Leonidas and his Spartans scream as they cut down every enemy in their path, they are also raging against two systems. First, in the Persians who come from overseas, and their own government council in Athens who refuse to take any action against the invading force. To Leonidas, the council is prioritizing the safety of its people below some preconceived status quo, a sentiment many Americans would feel in the next few years as the government would leave the average citizen to rot while spending billions bailing out banks, billionaires, and large corporations. A never-ending pit of rage and anger? Check. A gritty tone filtered over a fairly nerdy sword and sandals setting and story? Check. An army of morally reprehensible faceless thugs that are mindlessly slaughtered by the dozens by our hero? Check. A strong male protagonist with a history of war and violence whose actions are motivated by a predetermined mission rather than personal stakes? Check. This filter? Check. This may be the most 7th gen movie ever made. Closing thoughts. I love this type of movie. It makes me feel all warm and fuzzy. It's like Christmas for my brain. I'm not saying a movie needs to hit all of these checks to be considered 7th gen cinema, but it does have to try and hit some of them. At the end of the day, it's an intangible concept. You kind of just have to get it. Like calling something a dad movie, you just know it when you see it. And that's basically what 7th gen movies are. Dad movies, but for dudes in their late 20s and early 30s. Thank you for sitting around and listening to me rant about movies and video games. If you made it this far, you should definitely subscribe and like the video, and if you have friends, you should share it. I'm going to stick to this theme, I think, and talk about more movies that feel like a video game. My next video, I think, should probably be on Olympus Has Fallen, but that's all for now. Goodbye.